All right, so welcome to the last session of the day. Let's power through this to the end until we hit the evening party. This session is titled Building Globally Scalable Media Solutions with Azure Media Services, and this is one of two in the series. Tomorrow morning, the first session is the second part, but I am going to cover some of these common topics in both of those sessions. My name is Karl Ots. I work at a Finnish Azure consultancy company called Composure, and I've been working with Azure since 2011. And actually, one of my first Azure-related solutions was actually ramping up a video store in Azure, and we were actually delivering content into tablets and mobile phones through the UVP store, or back then it was called the Windows Store. And in my day job, I work with different companies, enterprises, startups, ISVs using Azure and securing Azure, and really transforming their IT usage. And I also run the local Azure user group together with my co-organizers, and we also have a Azure conference called IgluConf in Finland in January as well. It's literally the coolest conference out there with minus 20 degrees Celsius in Finland back then. With that, let's get started about Azure Media Services. So Azure Media Services is really a collection of platform as a service components, and you can, with Azure Media Services, you can take any multimedia or video or audio format file, any content, upload it into Azure Cloud, convert the format into any kind of format, analyze it, do your magic work on it, and then distribute it to any device anywhere through the Azure Media Services Cloud. And if you walk through all of the different steps here, the uploading, encoding, analytics, protecting the content, streaming it, and the clients, you can actually have all of these services as first-party apps or first-party services in Azure Media Services, or you can actually replace one or several of those with if you already have a partner, or if you already have built something of your own in there. I see a lot of customers using custom ingestion engines or uploading using, for example, Aspera UDP uploader. I see plenty of custom clients in there on the right hand side as well, especially with existing media or broadcasting customers. So in a sense, this is a collection of services just like Visual Studio Team Services, which means that you can pick and choose whether you'd like to go first party with Microsoft, or you'd like to go with a third party solution or build your own. So Azure Media Services is not just meant for media companies, as the name would suggest. It has been used for streaming several different Olympic games. It has been used for Super Bowl, all this type of large, high-scale events, and what you typically will think where a cloud solution for streaming media content would really fit well. However, you can also use it for doing your internal training. You can also use it for scanning through a lot of security content. You can also do town hall meetings for all of your internal employees, etc. And really the key concept here is that you can literally pick any type of media content and deliver it anywhere in the world for consumption in any device. And one of the key distinctions there towards traditional workflows, how would you do it in a regular environment on your own on-premises, is that the concept of dynamic packaging. And I'm going to work through that in just a couple of slides, but basically the idea is that instead of pre-packaging all of the different file formats that are, all of the imaginable file formats that are out there. You would actually go and use the power of cloud to package the media file into the file that is requested by the device on demand. So only when you are asked to, we actually scale and package it so that your end device actually gets the format that they choose. And one of the key benefits here for monetizing your content is the live advertisement insertion. And the live advertisement insertion actually means that if you have video on demand content, typically if you think of traditional broadcasting, you will actually have the same static advertisement in there. But with the live ad insertion, you would actually get just places for your ads, so that you every time your on-demand content is watched, you will actually get new ads all the time, so that you can actually keep on monetizing them if your content is being watched, for example, months or years later from the original recording. There's also a great set of industry standard content protection, all the way through ingesting or uploading the file into delivering the media content to all of the different devices, covering that with DRM. And it's really one of the first public clouds that has these industry standard recognitions in there as well. And there's a great set of analytics that we can do on both the media and actually the media consumptions, also the player side there as well. So traditionally, the media workflow has really been like this, and it still pretty much is on the Azure side as well. So we have a media file that we want to somehow upload into our services, and in the media sector we call this ingestion of media. So we upload that file, we encode it, we convert it into one or more specific formats that we want to, in that time we already have at least 4 different versions. We have the original uploaded version, and then we have at least one converted format. Then we add some copy protection, DRM, stuff like that, and then we will stream it either into a live channel or available for consumption on demand. So stuff like YouTube or Channel 9, for example. We can use content delivery networks in between there as well. So if you have a large audience that we want to reach, we can use something called a CDN in there as well. And in the end, we have the different player clients. So I think your smart TV has one, your phone has one, your different browsers can use different versions of the player as well. So this is what we are looking at, and this is basically the same whether you're working with Azure Media Services or whether you're building this on your own. And there's a great tool for you to get started, because this is a huge complex solution. There's 5 or 6 different areas and 1 or more different solutions for each of those areas of the whole package service as well. So there's a great tool called Azure Media Services Explorer tool that lets you get started with Azure Media Services and play around with the APIs, and you don't have to touch any code, and you can basically do many of those operations that are that you'd like to, even end-to-end, only using this tool. Of course, when you actually want to go into production, you typically use either your own existing out-of-the-box tool or a tool that you've coded yourself against those APIs in there. It's a great tool. I recommend that you check it out from the link in there, and I'm going to show it to you later on as well. So I mentioned this dynamic packaging, but before we go there, I'd like to tell you how this works traditionally. So before this dynamic packaging solutions from the cloud, when we wanted to deliver content to, for example, these 3 different devices, an Apple device, an Android device, and a Windows device, because all of these work natively with different formats. They work with different different media formats. They work with different DRM, so copy protection formats. You would actually have to produce basically all different versions. For each of those devices, you would actually have to produce a different video file. So if you have a, let's say, 10 gigabyte video file with like 2 hours full HD content, that's already 30 gigabytes of video content just for being able to deliver that content. And on top of that, if your device sits on 4G or if it sits on an Ethernet or Wi-Fi, then you would actually want to stream it using different bitrate. So you would have to have the original file size, the full HD, and then maybe 1 or 2 different file size versions of that as well. So you would actually end up with probably 5 to 10 different versions of that same file. So quite a lot of storage space needed for just delivering one set of content or one media file. And basically that's where this dynamic packaging comes in. So with Azure Media Services, with this dynamic packaging, we get the original input file in. We actually convert it only once, we encode it only once into this variable bitrate video file. And whenever a new request for content comes in, depending on the device, we actually dynamically, so on the go, wrap it into a new video container based on the device that requests it. So for example, an Xbox requesting the same video content will get smooth streaming content or content encoded using MPEG-dash, and for example, an Apple device will get HLS content in there. And that will really radically save on our storage space, because we would only have to keep one encoded asset of that media file. And to consume that content, we have something called an Azure Media Player. And Azure Media Player is a white-labeled player application on the cloud that sits there that we can use, customize to look like our own, and it takes care of converting the different formats for us. So this is the part that helps us to have a single player application. We can only code it once. We only have to code it once, and it takes care of us that if the device doesn't, for example, support HTML5, it will fall back to Flash or Silverlight for us. If the device has only limited connectivity, this player takes care of actually taking a smaller bandwidth version of the video file from the dynamic packaging in there as well. And we can customize it, play around with it. It's fully under our control. There's no Microsoft logo in there or anything. It's fully up for grabs for us. And so this is basically it. So we, for delivering this on-demand video files, we upload the media file into what Azure Media Services calls an asset container. So uploading can also be called ingestion in this media workspace. Then we encode the media file into this media services asset. So we encode it into typically a variable bitrate format so that we can actually then dynamically serve that content to any point. Then we have to have something called a streaming unit, and streaming unit is basically a endpoint URL for us that acts as the link for that media content. And streaming unit has a pricing impact. So per one streaming unit, we get 200 megabytes per second of throughput in there. And we can scale by having multiple streaming units or adding CDN in there. And then once we have that link up, once we have that content in the internet, we can play that content using the Azure Media Player. and this is how it would look like in more detail. The same thing as before. We take the content in, we encode it, we add the streaming endpoint, and once a device requests that content, Azure Media Services takes care of us that what is the different format. Is it HLS, smooth streaming, MPEG Dash? Do we want to download the whole video? Do we only want to give them bits and pieces so that they can start on faster? Are there multiple video, multiple audio, multiple subtitles needed, etc.? And this is now something that we can go ahead and take a look at. And for that, let me do some magic in here. I should be able to duplicate my screen very well. All right. So we can actually start here on the Azure portal. I'll just go ahead and go to my Azure Media Services account that I've created previously. It's just new Azure Media Services, and then we're good to go. Here on my assets, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start an upload in here of a video file, and we can then go ahead and work on that video through that whole scenario that we described on the on-demand media workflow. It's uploading quite nicely here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the Azure Media Services Explorer tool that I mentioned previously, and I'm going to show you how to work with that content that we just delivered. As you can see, it's now up there. It's a new file that we just added, and I'm going to start a new encoding work on that file. So right now this is the original file. It's single bitrate. If I want to watch that, I have to download the whole video. Once I go ahead and select encode with media encoder, I get a list of selections, and basically if you don't know any better, you should go with this content adaptive multiple bitrate MP4, which means that give me the best possible encoding from that actual source. And there's options to customize it using my own workflow if I'm deep in the media encoding, if I have some tools of my own, if I want that. But in this case, I'm just going to go with the presets. And now we actually switched tabs. So as you noticed, now we were here on the asset tab, and now we went into this jobs tab, and we started a media encoder standard processing job of this new file that I just added, and it goes into the processing for a while. Basically, this now has to do with how many units of media reserved units do I have. So I had the media streaming units, and those are meant for streaming my video content outside to the world. Media reserved units are meant for me for encoding. So the more of those I have, the faster my encoding job goes. And if I have more of them, I can actually do parallel processing so that I can actually encode several files at the same time. So let's just leave this encoding job here on for a while, and let's see what else is there in this tool. There's options for transferring the files also in the tool, not just from the portal. There's options from configuring the streaming endpoints, as I mentioned. They are pretty straightforward in here. Nothing too fancy, and there are options for managing different storage accounts in here as well. While this is running, we can go ahead and look for a previous job that I've run of a different video. So I'll go ahead and select publish, and for publishing my video, I actually have to create the streaming location endpoint, as I mentioned. I'll go ahead and go with the default so that this locator is actually available for 1 year. And once this is done, we see this little icon of publication in here. I can go ahead and open this this content up with Azure Media Player. and here are the options that I can choose from, and let's just go ahead and start this. So now I've opened the Azure Media Player. Now I opened the Azure Media Player to stream this content. This is not customized to my taste or anything, so I'm actually using the default one, so that you can see there are some getting started links in here. I can get some more coding diagnostics here as I want to as well. But this is now the content that is actually streamed from my streaming media services streaming endpoint, as you can see here on the URL as well. And I'll go ahead and stop that in there. And let's come back to this job in a little while, so that we can see that this one actually worked as well. All right. So Azure Media Player is a single player for all of these different screens. I can put that link up that I just started from my Azure Media Services Encoder Explorer tool, and I can share it to you, to anybody, and you can start using it, start trying it in your phone, in your tablet, in your different browsers that you might have. There's the link downstairs that I've added previously through Bitly, so you can go ahead and type that link in your phones and try it out. I get quite a good set of analytics from this media player. So I get average loading times, average watching times, average amount of locations of users, all of this out of the box, and I actually get quite a good Power BI implementation there out of there as well. So it's pretty well defined in the within the Power BI ecosystem there as well. So pricing. So this is one of the most costly Azure services out there. You can really do some damage to your MSDN subscription if you just forget something up. So first of all, of course, the storage. It's regular Azure storage where you store your files, so not that expensive. The only exception is that there is no zone level redundancy option for the storage. So the same pricing goes as for your regular Azure storage. For encoding, we can go either for shared environment, so we can go for shared set of encoding units, or we can buy some of our own if you want to get prioritization, or if you want to somehow be able to predict how long will it take. And for that we can get these media reserved units. But still what we actually pay for is the amount of actual used encoding power. And I did a quick calculation. For example, for a 2-hour full HD video, it's something like 3.5 euros or something like $4 to actually encode that into variable bitrate or any type of job. And then we need to stream that as well, and that depends on how many streaming units do we have, and that's something like 100 to 200 euros per unit, depending on your plan. Basically, there are three different levels or SKUs for these media reserved units. Basically, depending on how much content do you need to encode, depending on how many how large files do you have, this is your way of choosing to predict how long will it take to encode my job. So here's a quick example on the last one, on the S3 side. If it's a 5-minute long full HD video, encoding with the S3 unit will take approximately 2.7 minutes. If it's on the first one, if it's really 360p video, 5 minutes long, With the S1, it will take approximately 11 minutes to encode that. So quite a lot of time, and that of course is related to the price there for us as well. And now we can actually go ahead and go back to the format for the job that we started a while ago. So now it is actually here as listed as finished. So if we go here in assets, we actually see that the multi-bitrate format is actually ready. So if I go ahead and create a locator for that, just with the default settings again, it will take a while and pop up here as published, active streaming locator. That's great. We can go ahead and now go play that file like we did on the previous file that I had created before. So let's just start this using Azure Media Player as well, so that we can see that our new file actually got encoded. And there we are, quite good quality, no quality loss with this setting, so we are quite good. All right, so let's now switch gears to CDN for just a quick stroll around content delivery networks as well. So CDNs are a solution to the problem that what if I get too many requests from around the world to my same original servers, or what we call it here, the media origin server. And the solution, of course, is that we just bring a copy of that file a little bit closer to our clients, so that the clients can actually go ahead and ask for that file from the CDN server and not from our origin server. And really that's pretty much that. It's smart cache. Basically we get better performance, especially when we are doing this multiple round trips as we are doing when we are streaming video. We are getting all of those little bits of couple of megs at a time. And we are doing quite a lot of latency intensive work with video. Of course it helps us to scale, and it helps us to lessen the burden put on the origin server in terms of traffic as well. And really the idea is that at the first time the content is loaded, nothing really changes. We actually want to load that content into our CDN Edge server as well. But after that, when a client has actually requested that content and that is loaded into the CDN, after that we don't have to actually go back into the original server, but we can actually ask for that same content through the CDN, and that makes really the difference for high scale cases as well, especially large demanding cases, high peaks like the Olympic Games that has been using Azure Media Services as well. So Azure CDN really lets you reach your customers faster with these point of presence CDN servers. And Microsoft partners with two of the largest CDN providers, Akamai and Verizon, to deliver these locations worldwide. And Azure CDN is not a part of media services specifically. It works very well with Azure Media Services, so that you can actually hook this into all of these Azure streaming endpoints, but you can also hook this up directly for your Azure storage endpoints, or you can even hook this up into your Azure App Service web apps as well. It's basically just one tick in the box integration from the Azure portal, and then you're good to go. And it's not just a fancy cache. We can have all kind of smart features there. We can have geo-blocking, so that if my content is only allowed to be watched in a certain region, or if I just want to block it from specific countries, I can do that. We can have DDoS protection and much more. So how big of a difference are we talking about? So all of the regions, Azure regions in Europe are listed here. It also has the upcoming France regions, and also even the London and Cardiff regions that are overall a little bit smaller than the West Europe and North Europe in there. If I have a consumer, or if my client is, for example, in Poland, Norway, Finland, Spain, it will take a little bit longer time to get that content to me. And that's where the CDN locations come in. So with Azure CDN, we can actually get a lot more closer to our end customers. So here's a list of all of the CDN point of presence servers that are available through Azure CDN with the partners like Akamai and Verizon. And not all of them are even listed here either. There are many of them available within one country as well. All right. So what about security? The top thing to discuss always in the cloud. So Azure Media Services uses Azure Blob Storage, so standard Azure storage as I mentioned. And nowadays Azure Storage supports storage encryption service, which means that we can just select tick in the box in the Azure Storage account and say that all files within this storage account are always encrypted by default. Now we can choose to let Microsoft handle all of those keys, certificates for us, or we can bring in our own encryption keys if we so want to. So we have that storage at excuse me. So we have that encryption at rest capability in there. We also have nowadays for storage services the HTTPS enforcement, which provides us basically encryption in transit, which means that we only allow connections through this specific Azure storage account through an HTTPS enforced client. So our data or our media files are actually safe both when we are transferring, when we are uploading them to the cloud, and also when they are sitting there in the cloud waiting to be used. On top of that, we also, just for the developer side, when we are using Azure Media Services, or when I was using Azure Media Services through the portal and through the Azure Media Services Explorer tool, previously we used to have access keys, just like we do in, for example, Azure Storage nowadays. Now access keys are being removed, they are being deprecated, which means that we are actually getting the role-based access control features that we get from Azure AD support that's now being integrated. So in my case, I actually connected now to this Azure Media Services Explorer using an Azure AD service principal that I've created before, so that I know what's the account, I know how many times it's been used, I get alerts, I get monitoring for that. So we handle, so we encrypt data when we don't move them at rest, we encrypt when we upload that, so in transit, and we can also very securely manage all of the developers, all of that access to that data using the Azure AD integration. And also, as I mentioned, there is good support for all of the different DRM protection. So previously you would actually have to go and have your own solution when you wanted to deliver content for Android, when you wanted to deliver content for iOS, etc., etc. Now Azure Media Services has support for all of these on the go. So there's Play Ready support, there's so that's Microsoft technology, there's Widevine support for Google devices, and there's FairPlay support for Apple as well. Very good. So let's wrap this up. So what has been released recently? Media Services itself has been around for 5 or more years. It took a long time to get into general availability. They actually tried it out for large live events, such as a couple of different Olympic Games, before releasing that into GA as well. But now that it has been GA for a while, they're bringing a lot more integration with different Azure services in there. So as I mentioned already, the Azure AD support with role-based access control, all of that auditing, all of that logging, etc. Azure Blob Storage, that's used by Azure Media Services, now supports over 5 terabytes or up to 5 terabytes of files, which means that we can get to work with this 4K, 8K content of these new media supports, media files that are out there. HVAC support, which is the new H265 video standard, which basically lowers the compression rate so that the files are somewhere around 50% of the files of H264. So pretty good work in there, especially now that iPhone X and iPhone 8 are coming up and supporting this format. This will probably be a lot more familiar with the users later on as well. Media Redactor. So Media Redactor is a type of encoder that we can run, just like we ran the encoding from single bitrate into multi-bitrate format for supporting that dynamic packaging. This Media Redactor is actually a format that allows us to blur faces from a video content. And that's useful for, of course, privacy reasons, especially if we run this using this job for example, our internal videos, or maybe let's say CCTV or some other content. And I've actually run this before here, so that we don't have to wait. So let's zoom in a little bit. So this is the redacted combined mode, and this is the multi-bitrate which has been published there as well. So same as before, I go into playback, play with Azure Media Player, select the default browser and default settings, and now we run the same video that I showed you before, but now all of the faces have a little blur in them, so for privacy reasons. And this is something that, of course, yes, we could do before as well, but now this is just more democratized version of the same type of encoding job that before would have required specific licensing or even manual work to go through all of those frame by frame. Now we get it just as easy as we did for that regular format encoding for video files from Azure Media Services. So that's one. That's the Media Redactor. Then there we go. Then the content moderator actually scans our content if we don't want to allow adult or any profanity content in our uploads. So this is the answer to the question: is that a hot dog? Is it not a hot dog? Maybe it's something that we wouldn't want to show our kids or wouldn't want to show in our content. So we screen for unwanted content, and we can highlight it, we can block it to be uploaded to our servers. And then some latency stuff. There's now a new performant cloud encoder for live streaming content a little bit more faster than before, which means that we can now get to up to 15 to 20 seconds of latency in optimal conditions as well. There's plenty of content to get started on learning AMS. There's a learning path provided by Microsoft for both the live streaming and on-demand video streaming. There's a great set of tutorials available in there, and there's a list of links that you'll get to download later as well. There's a great demo site at aka.ms/amslabs, and with that, that's pretty much it. Thank you. Questions? Thank you.